fellow Tim.
Hello, fellow Tim. Is it Stegall or Stegall?
It's Stegall. It's Lydia. Lydia could have told you.
If it was Stegall, that would be the German pronunciation.
It would have rhymed with my name, actually. It would have been Tim Dahl and Tim Stegall. Stegall. Sorry. Anyhow, I'm getting silly.
It's still all right. Calm down. It still rhymes. Okay.
I always tell people, I don't have a ponytail and I do not do action pictures. So
I'm glad. I'm glad. Yes, and you're not a county sheriff either. And you didn't move to Russia. Doesn't he live in Russia now?
I think so.
All right. Hang on. Let's get this started the right way. This is the Lydian Spin with a couple of chuckle fuckers today. That would be Tim Dahl and Tim Stegall. Not Stegall, but Stegall. That would be Stegall and Dahl. Yes. Two Tims, both already chuckling their way into oblivion. Well, Tim, that would be you. You have a bit to be euphoric about today, don't you? Why don't you fill us in on that little tidbit you filled us in on?
Literally 30 minutes ago, I got off the phone with a representative of the estate of Joe Strummer. I have been contracted to write the liner notes for a Joe Strummer and the Mescaleros box set that's going to be out.
Hooray! Cool.
I believe in the springtime. And Lydia knows that the Clash are my favorite band ever, the reason I do everything I do. So she knows I'm over here throbbing.
Well, and with that fact in mind, you're lucky I still talk to you. Now, let me just explain that Tim is an encyclopedia of punk rock, a journalist. He had a band called The Hormones, maybe still has it, still does. Is really, do you ever feel like you're kind of the last punk rocker standing to some degree? I mean, you would know who's still out there, but I know a lot of your interviews or writings, I mean, at this point, like you're going back to write about somebody, Joe Strummer from the late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been around here long enough that now I've become a historian.
Right.
I mean, punk always exists. It always has existed. There's still some of those people active. I mean, you see that in the interviews the series of interviews I've been doing with alternative press. Some people just transfer it to something different, like, Richard Hell concentrates on his writing.
He should concentrate more on that, actually, if you ask me.
Well,
meaning, yeah, he needs to up the ante on that crap.
You're talking about some of the originators and all that stuff. What about people who just wear the punk uniform and they call themselves punk? Like, what defines punk besides the music? Is it the attitude? Is it fashion? I mean, when are you a charlatan? When can you say, like, that's not punk, although someone's selling themselves as punk? I mean, you go to Europe and you play the Squats and there's like a gazillion of these fucking bands. And you're like, is it the uniform? Like what separates them? Like, is it a spirit? So educate me on this one.
Well, I think, you know it when you see it and when you hear it, it is the spirit. It is the attitude more than anything else. It's not somebody, wearing a leather jacket with spikes or whatever and playing 90-mile-an-hour thrash music.
Sure it is, quite often. What are you talking about?
You know what I'm saying here, Lydia. It's more about a mindset and a certain way of working and doing
a rebellion, quite frankly.
Yeah, you're oppositional to everything else. You're doing something that you're not doing just to be popular or whatever, and you're going to do it by any means necessary.
So when does commodified quote unquote punk start pissing you off? Like, well, I mean, at what point is it stale and old to you? If you're the real deal, are you sometimes looking at like, what the fuck? People are just carrying the torch and not even touching the source.
Well,
not to rhyme.
I don't think that anybody that touches this, that actually does touch the source. Well, that it's those that don't touch the source that are not carrying the torch, honestly. I mean, it's easy to see what's bogus, like say Blink 182 out there.
Right.
Oh,
It's easy to see that, it
Right.
but I mean,
and yet it sells more than any of them. Like Blink 182 is one of the biggest selling rock bands of all time. And so yet they're cons or frauds. It's kind of interesting how that.
well, yeah, it's a bunch of frat boys,
Right.
playing music I would have otherwise liked, but it's the mindset that
Right.
it's the mindset that
And isn't who's that drummer of Blink 182, the one that was in the car, the plane crash was
Travis Barker.
Yeah, he was wearing a Lydia Lunch t-shirt. It's like someone like dressed him up in this fucking thing. Like
don't talk about my coming loss.
I know, but does he even know who you are, Lydia?
I hope not. Better yet, does the cunt next to him know who I am? That doesn't matter. Let's go back a little bit to the origins of your own personal rebellion, and how, I know that as a very youngster, you found music that kind of like most of us, I mean, whether it was literature or music, that's it. That's our salvation. How old were you when you first heard those inglorious chords called punk rock that turned you out, so to speak?
I was 12. I grew up I was born and raised in a little town in Texas called Alice.
Where is that exactly?
It's near Corpus Christi, Texas.
Oh, whoa! So really down there near the water, on the a half hour from the Gulf.
Yeah, pretty much. That's about where I lived.
Okay.
It was oil and ranching country around
Right.
there, and very very small town. And I started seeing when the Sex Pistols came to America. I was starting to see them on the evening news and things like that, and it just I'm right now working on a book that's the history of the Austin punk scene, and the Pistols at Randy's Rodeo in San Antonio is a whole chapter that I'm in the middle of working on, and I wrote that.
Curious about that.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But Walter Cronkite looks like he was about to vomit every time he had to say the name the Sex Pistols.
That's satisfying.
And I'm watching this and I'm just thinking, well, this sounds more like my mom's 50s rock and roll records than what I'm hearing out there right now. I mean, this is the time of either Ted Nugent or disco or Fleetwood Mac.
Right.
It was exciting, and I was kind of thrilled by the idea of this front man that was an anti-entertainer. It was, I mean, he's getting up there and saying things like, "I'm not here for your amusement, you're here for mine."
Right.
I just loved that, and it was just such an explosive sound and everything.
Well, and also at that age, you had a lot to rebel against. Not only the place that you're from, a small, oil town, but your family situation as well. Like so many of us had to rebel against not only the outside, but the inside of what's going on. So we turned to things that spoke for us before we could speak for ourselves.
Oh, yeah. And, it's like I'm very articulate now, but I wasn't at that point. And it wouldn't be until a long time later that I could articulate the war that was going on inside my head.
Do you think that it helped when you had the growth spurt and became bigger than the bullies in school and then went punk rock?
Totally. Totally. I was getting picked on, and suddenly I'm, nearly 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
In just the space of a few months' time.
Amazing.
And I'm like, got this haircut all of a sudden, and I'm hand painting these t-shirts saying "destroy" and walking into Alice High School, and you could just hear everybody's voice drop, and it's silence, and then they're going, "God!" And some of the mouthier assholes are saying, "Are you on drugs?" And I would like to say, "No, but your mother is. I know because I sold them to her behind fuck you." And suddenly it's like, you don't want to fuck with that guy. He's crazy.
That always helps.
I said an epiphany is almost like, just like Sex Pistols catching on. It's like viral before going viral. The publicity machine that Malcolm McLaren kind of just launched out there, and there was just all these teenagers just waiting for anything to grab onto and just to take down everything in front of it. And it's just like, it was amazing that the youth was so ripe for something like that. Cause it was also a big corporate push, but you don't know where that's going to land. And
because Malcolm McLaren tried it with the New York Dolls and fell flat.
Yeah, it fell flat. They
were already amazing, and he just tried to convert and pervert them in the wrong way.
Johnny Thunders was genuinely rebellious and wasn't about to get molded. You know,
right. I always loved the Malcolm McLaren quote, like when the publicity was like kind of building before the album came out, and he's like, "I always thought it would have been funny if the album never came out."
Well, you're going to find out from my book. I mean, these chapters are being serialized in the Austin Chronicle as I write them. And next 3 weeks, you're going to see the events of 1977, and then leading up to the Sex Pistols at Randy's Rodeo. And that's going to appear.
Very curious about that.
The anniversary.
What year did that happen, Tim?
77?
1978, January 8th, 1978.
Oh, right. I just missed it. Okay.
And how old were you?
I was 12. And
cool.
Mom and Dad were not about to let me go to San Antonio to see the records of civilization. But I think I told you about this when you interviewed me earlier this year. I could get away with seeing Patti Smith 6 months later. That name is innocuous enough.
Interesting. Okay.
You know,
we both started at like 12 going to rock concerts, only I was a bit more manipulative, so I could actually get my dad to drive me and pick me up as late as I could convince him to do it after, pilfering free tickets and meeting the promoters. But, you start at that age because of the desperate situation, both, like I said, inside and outside of where you are.
Well, yeah. Also, Lydia, you lived in Rochester. You live San Antonio, 2 hours from Alice, something like that. How far away is it?
Yeah, about 3 hours.
3 hours. So it's not so easy. Exactly.
Yeah, I was lucky to grow up there because there were so many concerts that came through there at one point. So I was very lucky with that. So let's go back to the young 12 to 16-year-old, the sprouting Tim, getting punky and no longer being bullied. So when did you decide, okay, I have to either write about rock or start a band? I mean, were they simultaneously? And, we know how difficult it is when you're at that age, but how mandatory it is.
Right. Can I digress a little bit? Because I know you probably wanted me to get some of this background that you've been talking to me about that led to me.
Sure. Love to.
As I told you, the childhood was not great. I was raped when I was 5 by a neighbor.
Holy shit.
My family just covered it up. Basically, it's like, no, you can't play with him anymore, but
don't talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. My father was this alcoholic redneck who used to beat my mother in front of me. They split up when I was 12, thankfully. He was never much of a presence in my life after that. He wouldn't come get me for, his week, every other weekend visits.
Better that he didn't.
That's true. And he stopped paying his child support. He just disappeared after a while.
Well, he showed you everything you didn't want to be.
That's exactly right. He was the biggest influence on my life because he was exactly who I did not want to be. And, my family was not very encouraging. They saw me as some sort of nuisance, I think, more than anything else.
Siblings?
I'm an only child.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Yeah, if you can't afford one kid, you shouldn't have more.
Exactly. Well, my mother unfortunately couldn't because she got hysterectomy. So, endometriosis shortly after I was born and had to have a hysterectomy. But yeah, we weren't living under very good circumstances. So it was a good idea that I be the only child. I mean, she could barely afford to feed and clothe me. And, my family did not want me having ideas of my own because I was already like listening to their conservatism. And I was already listening to what the preacher was saying at the church and thinking, I don't like this shit. I don't agree with this. For one thing, when my parents were getting divorced, they'd spent 6 weeks preaching sermons about the evils of divorce. And it's like, you haven't seen what I've been seeing these last few years. Fuck you. And so, yeah, that was what this music meant to me. And then reading books like On the Road by Jack Kerouac and Catcher in the Rye, reading the works of Lester Bangs. I mean,
still one of the greatest rock writers, ever.
He is my inspiration as a writer, the same way that Johnny Thunders was my inspiration as a guitarist and a musician. I told you about when I was 14, 15 years old, they gave me for Christmas the Rolling Stone Illustrated History of Rock and Roll. And Lester had several essays in that one that are just incredible. My favorite one, though, was one on the British invasion, and he's writing about the Dave Clark Five. And he says in that, rock and roll at its core is nothing but a bunch of raving shit.
Nice.
And I thought, okay, this is my man. And yeah, it was a few years later when I was in college, and I was still a drinking man at that time. A drinking buddy of mine became the editor of the campus newspaper. And one night we're getting soused, and it's like, Tim, you like music. Can you write? We need a rock critic. And I come to find out I'm going to get paid $25 a week to get records for free and write about it. I was like, oh, sure. Turned out I was pretty good at it. It was this happened about the same time I'm starting, to write my first songs and things like that and play guitar and, thinking about trying to make my own music. I've always just looked around at the culture and seen gaps in it. Like there's nobody writing about the bands I like, so I'm going to write about them. There's no one playing the music I want to hear, so I'm going to make it, And
what year is this? So when you actually, the campus newspaper?
1985. And that was probably about the first time I'd heard Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, too.
Well, that'll wake you up.
What about Butthole Surfers in Texas? I mean, I'm sure you were running into those guys.
Didn't really run into them until later, but I did see one of those early shows where they're like, projecting, penis surgery films on, and, driver's ed films on top.
Oh, yeah. Of people being killed. Yeah.
Yeah. While King is like lighting his cymbals on fire.
There's and there's a sousaphone. It's like, what's going on?
Oh my God.
Well, a lot of weird things have come out of Texas. I mean, we had Billy Gibbons before ZZ.
Ornette Coleman, the inventor of free jazz. He was driven out of Texas, so now that
13th floor elevators.
13th floor elevators. Absolutely. That's where my Austin punk book begins, is actually with Rocky Erickson recording the very first Austin punk single, which was Two-Headed Dog in 1975, before there's even a scene here in this town. That's Rocky Erickson and Doug Somm, two members of the previous counterculture, showing the way to the future for this town.
And so your Austin punk book is being chronicled in the Austin Chronicle now. Yeah. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's being
serialized.
It's being serialized. That was when I first had this idea a few years ago. My then editor, Raul Hernandez, said, why don't we do this like Fear and Loathing was done in Rolling Stone, or Bonfire of the Vanities? We'll commission you to just write this book. And in a way, that's going to end up being my advance on this. I'm looking to try to get a local university press to actually publish the book once it's all done and everything. I don't know.
Isn't out of Texas, isn't that where, for instance, the book Adele Bertai wrote on LaBelle, Why LaBelle Matters? Maybe they'll go for a
UT Press.
Go for a Why Punk Rock Matters.
Well, yeah, UT Press has been doing a lot of that stuff. They did a Vivian Goldman book recently about females in punk rock. They did Kathy Valentine's autobiography.
So there you go. Now let's go back in time a bit. So,
Yeah. When did you leave Alice? How old were you, and when did you get out of there?
I left there when I was 25 and moved to Austin in 1991 after attending my first South by Southwest, and on behalf of Alternative Press, whom I was writing for by that point. I did my own fanzine for a time called Noise, 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 and that got the attention of, the fanzine network. So I ended up at Flipside, I ended up at Your Flesh, and then about this point, the alternative marketing department was being developed by major labels, and they're signing people like Jane's Addiction and the Pixies and whoever, and they get the bright idea that, well, maybe this guy can write some ad copy for us. And it was on a junket to Cleveland that I ended up meeting Mike Shea, the publisher of Alternative Press. And, he was just trying to transition it from being a fanzine to being a newsstand glossy at that point. And I ended up being the first paid writer for the magazine.
First underpaid writer?
First paid. Oh, yeah. Okay. I missed that one.
Yes, that is true. That is true. But I was the first paid writer at the mag. And it's funny because he asked me if I had anything. I had this interview with Steve Jones from the Pistols that nobody wanted to touch for some reason. And, it was great because Steve was detailing everybody that he had stolen equipment from to get the band going. I mean, he detailed, I got my Fender Twin from Bob Marley and the Wailers.
That's funny.
We stole David Bowie's microphones,
Oh boy.
How did you get the Steve Jones interview?
He was signed to MCA, and the publicist there was a good friend of mine. And he was putting out that horrible hair metal album that he put out at the time. And
all right.
They sat me down with Jonesy on the phone he talked to me for 2 hours, and went into incredible detail. The funny thing is in his memoir a few years ago, he now claims, well, I don't remember if that's how it happened or not. Jonesy, I know where the bodies are buried, brother.
Tim or Lydia, I mean, I'm not really a klepto, but have either of you ever stolen things from another band?
No comment. I'll take the whiff.
I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it might incinerate.
I'll brag about mine.
I refuse to answer on the grounds that I might want him on the podcast one day.
Well, there you go. I'll brag about mine. I stole the catering from Spice Girls once on the road. Yes. But all right, we'll move on.
Did you eat it off their naked body though?
Well, the thing is, they weren't going to eat that shit anyways. And I was like picking up backline in Los Angeles.
Wasn't the question.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, yeah, Baby Spice. Yeah, exactly.
But 2 years before I ended up in Austin, Tim, was when Lydia and I met in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
That was.
How did you get sent on that sojourn?
I earned one of my first checks from a major label, and I decided I was going to take my spring break in college to go to Los Angeles for the first time. And I was writing for Flipside at the time, so I stayed on Al Flipside's couch and spent 2 weeks there buying records and clothes and hanging out with all these people I'd been interviewing for the magazine. And Pat Naylor, then your publicist, said, "Oh, Tim, Lydia's in town." It's like, I would love to talk to her. And I called up Peter Davis and I said,
who your Flesh and a booking agent?
Yes. I called him up. I said, "Would you like a Lydia lunch interview?" He said, "Yes." And then, Pat got the two of us on the phone, and I don't know, we just hit it off instantly, you and I. It ended up that, this is funny, she does not remember this, but she was staying with Lance Loud.
I do not remember it at all, but remind me.
Yeah, let's hear this.
Yeah, she was in town trying to shop around a film idea that she had, and she wanted to do something that was a little bit more big budget than the stuff she'd been doing with Kern.
Maybe it was Psycho Menstrum, which Robert Williams gave me the title for. I don't know.
Yes, that was it. That was it. You were in town shopping that around, and you were staying with Lance Loud. And my last day in Los Angeles, we finally met up. And yeah, we had this glorious 3-hour interview, 6 hours before I ended up going down to the bus station and heading back to Texas. And I remember I was sick. The Los Angeles air made me sick. I was running a fever.
It'll do that.
But for whatever reason, you and I just vibe. You made black coffee for me, and yeah, we just had this wonderful interview at the time. And Al Flipside took photos of the two of us together. We just look adorable.
I always say that about Lydia is it's her Sicilian roots. She sizes up people quickly and she decides instantly if she likes you or doesn't forever.
Pretty much.
Not always, but generally.
Pretty much.
She's put up with a lot of stuff from me that she probably wouldn't.
Oh, please.
Oh, well, she's very caring, very caring. Very caring and generous person.
Yes, absolutely she is. Absolutely she is. And
it hasn't been that hard, really, honey bunny. Come on now. Really. Come on.
You know,
We've always had a safe distance so that I didn't have to strangle you in your own misery or mine.
Boy.
As the night nurse to sick men, I've been very tender in my care for you.
Oh, yes. Did she ever bring you soup? Whenever she makes a great soup. She makes many different ones.
I have never been, privy to that.
He's only feasted on me. I've never fed him.
She taught me about a lot of authors and things like that. She's definitely been a part of my education. She's like the cool big sister or something,
Tim, where are you right now? Where, as you speak with us, where are you?
I am in Austin, Texas.
You're in Austin. Okay.
Yeah. I've lived here off and on since 1991.
Were you at the Retrovirus show a couple years ago when we played there? Did you? You weren't.
I was going through some bad social anxiety at the time.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I couldn't even bring myself out of my hovel at that time.
Well, there's some rumors we might be back in your way in the spring.
I will be there.
Yes. There's some rumors out there.
Some rumors.
Yes.
But to be confirmed. So, Tim, you must have been sent to interview some of your so-called heroes. What were some of the best and any of the worst? Like, you're very easy to get along with. You're very knowledgeable and very jovial when you're not miserable.
Thank you.
You never bring the misery, I don't think, to your job. So tell us some of the best and worst examples.
Yeah, this is a fluff so we can get the dirt.
Okay, well, I will begin with some of the worst, actually.
Nice.
I want to hear it. Yes, now we're talking. It's a party.
Glenn Danzig.
Well,
I can
no
imagine.
doubt.
Tell us the story.
Oh, God. It was...
What year?
It was 1988, I believe it was. And it was about the time that he'd put the first Danzig album out. And I was a huge Misfits fan. And I'm sorry, I did not want to hear Glenn Danzig imitating Black Sabbath. I'm not a metal guy. I do not have a metallic bone in my body. So,
what about Metallic KO?
Well, I don't consider that heavy metal. That is definitive punk rock,
Exactly. Carry on.
But Danzig gets on the phone with me, and I'm trying to be diplomatic. And I say, well, this is pretty interesting new album you've got. What do you mean it's fucking great? Well, that's very easy for the artist to say work. No, I'm being totally fucking objective here, man. It's fucking great. What's your problem?
Okay. He was on steroids, I think. That kind of makes sense.
Well, funny, it only made him grow out, not up.
Mike Ness of Social Distortion was not very forthcoming at all. It was kind of like, hey, dude, talking to him. At one point, he actually said to me, I'm still an outlaw, man. I hang out with reformed gangsters. And I'm just like biting my lip, trying not to scream, poser! At it. HR of the Bad Brains.
Well, that's a wild card, no matter what.
He ran out of the room before the phone was handed to him.
What was he in prison? Okay, I mean,
No, he was on the road with the Bad Brains.
Yeah. Well, he also recorded a track with the Bad Brains from prison. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, he did. But at this time it was like they just signed with Madonna's label Maverick, and they were doing the
what year was that?
95, I think it was.
I had no idea they signed with Maverick. Okay.
Oh yeah, they were on Madonna's label, and that's why I got called. It's like, would you like to talk to the Bad Brains for alternative? Well, of course, they were the greatest hardcore band ever. HR went running out of the room the minute he was supposed to get on the phone with me, and it's like the tour manager says, hold the line, let me go find him. And I wait 5 minutes, and he says, we can't find HR. We're going to put you on with Daryl Jennifer. Okay, great bass player. And Daryl gets on the phone with me, and I tell him it's an honor to talk with you. I've been a huge fan of the bands for many, many years. That's cool. What's your first question? And I ask him the question. He says, next question. Ask him the question after that. Next question. Third question.
But that could be like just his anxiety projecting that fucking HR is just doing who knows what and fucking up. And they're like, what the fuck's this guy doing?
Yeah, but still, then you could just easily say, can we do this another time, or we're not going to do it? You don't have to be a dick. And take it from a dick. Take it from a dick.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing. About 4 questions in, he says, you were going to ask HR these questions? Really? What's your next question? I asked him, he says, next question. I said, I'm trying to get you to explain yourself to people, and you're not cooperating. And he says, well, ask me a question. I'll answer it.
Oh, fuck off.
So I asked him the next question, and he says, next question. I said, I'm so sorry I wasted your time. You have a wonderful life. And I went. Always
the diplomat.
Yep. And I went on the phone immediately afterwards to their publicist and to my then editor at Alt Press, Joe Banks. And I told them, we're not getting an interview here because these guys are dicks who did not cooperate.
And look, let me just jump in.
I know where this is going.
Hang on. No, let me jump in for a minute. You come to the table knowing the situation, which you're going to talk about. You come with the knowledge of research of these bands. You're not Joe Schmo coming out of nowhere. So that's completely disrespectful. I mean, if I don't want to do an interview, I say I don't want to do it. If I'm going to do it, I mean, actually the journalists are doing you a fucking favor. The same way we're doing you a favor now, Tim. You know what I mean?
Well, they were being, that's the thing. It was completely unprofessional. I mean, I don't know that I'm exactly the definition of a professional myself. I'm a punk rock kid who happened to stumble into this profession. But I mean,
interest and dedication to a subject matters more than anything else. And you had it. So. Well, yeah, let's go on to the black hole of all music now, Al Jorgensen.
Oh, I got some stories myself. Go ahead.
Well, sometime in the mid-90s, Jorgensen moves his entire operation to a town just outside of Austin. I think it was Dripping Springs, which is where the Butthole Surfers settled for a long time as well. They were supposedly getting a new album wrapped up, and I was driven out to the ranch by Warner's director of publicity at the time, a guy named Bill Bentley, who actually got his beginning here in Austin with the alt weekly before the Chronicle, the Austin Sun. I'm deposited there. Al is entertaining all these other journalists. I think Keith Cameron was there from the NME. People I'd been reading and never thought I would meet. I'm like kind of pushed around different areas while he's talking to these other people. Oh, he'll get to you, but want to hear the album? Well, they take me to the studio and come to find out that Ministry has not finished this album. They are only halfway through and only one song is mixed. And they're telling the label they have finished this record. And it's going to be out soon.
Sounds like heroin, but keep on going.
Oh yeah, well, I saw some telltale signs. I saw the bottle of Metamucil lying around. hey, I met Johnny Thunder 6 months before he died. I know a junkie when I see one. Okay. But yeah, it ended up very badly. I talked to Paul Barker, who was quite a gentleman, but at the end of the night, Al was like, can we just meet up another time? I said, no, this is for the cover of Alternative Press, and you have fucked off, because you're too fucking high to talk to me right now, and you're star fucking the NME. And he blew up. Paul Barker had to yank me out of there and drive me home right then.
Good job.
He wasted my time. He wasted the time of the magazine that helped build Ministry to begin with. I mean, I used to tease Alternative Press mercilessly when I first started writing to him. I would send in my articles back in the day that when you mailed them in I would address the envelopes to Wax Track Stroke Book Monthly. It was. My
cousin he's older than I am, and I'm originally from Chicago. Knew him in high school or went to high school with him. And this is back when I was 8 years old. I actually saw Ministry when they were like a new wave band.
Right.
But Al used to go around the bars when, in Illinois, when the drinking age was 18, with a fake British accent, trying to pick up girls. I mean, that's pretty pathetic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been mistaken for being British, and surprisingly, it's always after people have heard me talk. And usually when they tell me that, I say, yes, mate, I have a very thick British accent, don't I, Cov? It's like, it's like
Manchester, Texas.
Yeah. I can do a very good British accent when I want to, but it's.
Well, you've heard enough fucking records now.
But Lydia, don't you have a Al Jorgensen story?
I've already told it.
I'm
not telling it again.
Okay.
I'm giving him no lip service.
All right, fair.
But you ask me about the best ones. Well, it's like it's the ones that do treat me professionally and are taken aback a little bit by my knowledge when I talk to them. I mean, I think that was the case with you, Lydia, when we first met. And I think that's why we've since talked on a number of occasions.
I like my boy smart.
But I mean, one of the coolest things was there was this period where I ended up talking to all these classic country acts from like the 60s and all of that for the Austin Chronicle. And they were totally taken aback. I walked into my editor's office and I put kick my Doc Martens up on his desk and I say, Willie Nelson's coming to town. He just got dropped by his label. And, they did it just after putting out this career-long box set. He's just been, there's just been this Houston label that's done this, tribute album to Willie, where all these alternative acts like L7 and X are recording Willie Nelson songs. We should talk to them. And they're all standing around staring at me. You talk to Willie Nelson? I said, I grew up in Texas. Okay.
And Willie Nelson is punk.
Well, he's an American icon. I mean, you frown upon that? I don't care.
Pot smoking, non-tax paying badass.
What about Waylon Jennings? You ever interview him?
That ended up happening too. But what always ended up happening was I'll give you the rundown. It was Willie first, then it was Merle Haggard. That was the big one for me.
Sure.
My favorite country singer of all time. Oh my God. He was
Bakersfield, California.
Absolutely. And then Waylon, and then Ray Price.
Okay. All right.
I hit just about everybody except
David Allan Coe.
Country dirt.
I hit everybody except maybe Johnny Cash and Hank Williams Sr., but he was long dead at that point. But, generally it's like, I would walk onto the bus and, here's Sid Vicious walking onto their tour bus, spiky hair, leather jacket, hammer and sickle t-shirt. And they're like, huh? And then I get to talking to him and it's like, wait a minute, this guy knows more about my music than I do. And, Willie was great. I mean, especially like I'm sitting up there in the front of the Honeysuckle Rose, his famous tour bus. And they tell me, well, Willie's got company right now. You're going to have to hold on a second. So they're in the inner compartment is closed. I'm looking out the bus window and it looks like Beatlemania outside. this guy who's just been dropped by his label. And
right, exactly.
Women are
very
like,
loyal fan base. Yeah.
Women are like pulling up their blouses, showing me their tits, thinking I'm going to get them on the bus with Willie. And the next thing I know, the inner compartment to the bus opens up, cloud of green smoke comes out, and I'm face to face with Bruce Springsteen, who's in town playing a show of his own, and he's come there to pay respects to Willie. And it's like, what the fuck do I say to the biggest rock star in the world? It's like, hi, Bruce. Oh, hey, how's it going, man?
A great cover of Suicide.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And he shakes.
Nebraska was a good album.
He wrote Hungry Heart for the Ramones. His manager told him, no, that song's too good. You can't give it to him. I want to hear what the Ramones would have done with that. But yeah, he looks at me, shakes my hand. Hey, how's it going, man? And jumps off the bus, and I'm watching, and nobody is noticing Bruce Springsteen is walking among them. And, I go in, and Willie and I have this amazing conversation. My favorite part to always recount is that at one point I look at him, I say, have you ever written a bad song? And he gets this twinkle in his eye. He says, nope, at least none that you'll ever hear.
Wait, what was I missed the last part you said?
At least none that you'll ever hear.
Oh, that's funny.
Let me just go ahead and finish this. He helped to legitimize me to my family. They did not understand what the hell it was I did for a living. What? Rock critic? Who wants to write about that noisy garbage at you? You actually making money at this? Well, I got Willie to autograph photos for my mother and my grandmother. And then I told them about meeting Bruce Springsteen. And after that, they suddenly respected me.
Well, you know what? They actually, maybe that's great. I mean, they opened up to you more. I don't know where it went from there, but
it helped a little bit. I at least had some semblance of a good relationship with them as a young adult.
There's no joy like when they're all dead. I'm sorry to say it.
Well, my mom and my grandmother are long gone.
Right before we came back on for the second part, I had a little coughing fit. I was choking on some ghosts.
Well, it's the anniversary of my dad's death, so or at midnight it will be. So,
it was the anniversary of my mother's death on Friday.
And my mother died on New Year's Day. So
right around the winter solstice, it's a lot.
I was choking on some ghosts during the interim, and I think they were mostly your ghosts. So
George Jones, did you ever interview George Jones?
Never got to interview Possum. I would have loved to.
I mean, he was pretty far out. If you got it, you had a chance. You didn't really know what you were going to get.
Oh yeah. Well, in that time period, also, I was fortunate enough to interview Ray and Dave Davis of the Kinks.
Oh, cool.
And I was the only American journalist that time around to talk to both brothers. That's a hilarious story because, I told my friend who was their publicist, well, I want to interview them separately.
Yeah, sure.
What year was that?
This was about 85, 86. It was what turned out to be the final Kinks album. They decided.
Was it any good?
It was pretty good. It was one of those unplugged albums where they were doing a bunch of, Ray's classics, but, acoustically for the most part. I talked to Ray. He was great. He started telling me about how the greatest rock and roll show he ever saw was Johnny Thunder's Heartbreakers, and told me about this riot that occurred when he was watching the Heartbreakers. And, Lee Childers tries to get up there and calm the crowd, and they ended up throwing more shit at him, et cetera, et cetera.
Ray Davies hosted a Meltdown, which was a festival they'd have once a year in London. And he had Big Sexy Noise on there and wrote a very nice letter. He was very cool. I don't know if he knew anything about me, but he got us on that bill.
Well, very prolific and just never stopped. I mean, it's kind of amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But after I got through with the interview, he apparently advised his publicist, I don't want anybody talking to baby brother.
Oh, weird.
And that my friend told me this, and then I could almost hear him look one way and then the other and say, okay, I'm giving you a phone number. You didn't get it from me. So the number turned out to be the New York-based rock journalist Roy Trakin that I had read over the years. And I called him and told him my story. And once again, I practically hear him look one way and the other say, okay, I'm going to give you this number. You didn't get it from me. I ended up talking to a woman who was also a music writer whose name I cannot remember. I told her the story and she was like, oh, God damn it. Hold on. So she puts me on hold. Next thing I know, I'm in a three-way conversation with her and Dave Davies. He's at the airport. He's at LAX about to fly back to London. And I hear, what? Ray said what? That fucking bastard. He's always fucking stitching me up. And I'm like, oh, shit. And I'm like on the other line going, Dave, calm down. Look, I don't want to get into the middle of one of your fucking feuds with your brothers. You two make the Gallagher brothers from Oasis look like the fucking Partridge Family. And he starts laughing the minute I say that. I said, look, the story of the Kinks is Ray's songwriting and your guitar playing. I cannot do the story of the Kinks without you. There's this pause. You're a good man. I'll talk to you when I get to London. And he called me a week later and had a wonderful interview. And yeah, I was the hero at the Austin Chronicle there. I was the only journalist in America who talked to both brothers. I've had wonderful conversations with John Lydon, even though I'll never talk to the fucker again after he lied to me about his support of Trump. I don't cotton to liars. I had a very good relationship with John, and he always opened up to me in ways that I have never seen him open up to other journalists. But I'm sorry, he fucking lied to me and he supported the worst American president in history. So fuck him.
I wouldn't even bother to fuck him. I just let him continue to fuck himself. Well, let's go on this track. Who haven't you interviewed that's on your list?
I would love to talk to Keith Richards.
Good one.
And believe it or not, even though I've been friends with him probably as long as I've known you, Lydia, I have never spoken to Thurston Moore.
Well,
and I would love to talk to Thurston. And
he's pretty accessible. I mean, you could just
I've talked to him many times, and for whatever reason, it just never happens. I've told him, I said, look, man, we're friends. It should be a natural.
Well, that's not out of the question.
I'd love to talk to Bob Dylan. I don't know if that would ever happen.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough. I don't think that's so easy. Yeah.
But I would love to talk to Bob Dylan. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the two greatest American songwriters of the 20th century were Bob Dylan and Hank Williams.
What about Dolly Parton? Have you ever interviewed her?
She's really good. She's really great, but she's no Hank Williams.
No, I'm not comparing in songwriting. I'm saying, have you interviewed her, or would you want to interview her?
Oh, I would love to talk to Dolly. Are you kidding? She's a hoot.
Oh yeah, she does really well in the interviews. Yeah.
She herself is all of Hooters.
God.
Yeah.
Good one. We need a laugh track for that one.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think so. Well, you've talked yourself. I mean, you've written hundreds of articles, and it's great that your Austin Punk Chronicles are being chronicled in the Austin Chronicle now, which is a serialization of your book on that. You're going to be writing the liner notes for this Joe Strummer box that's coming out, right?
I wanted to ask you something about, but go ahead. Keep up. Sorry, I interrupted Lydia's little monologue.
No, I'm just saying what's going on here. What's
oh yeah, and I'm also finishing up bio for John Doe. He's getting a folk album out in the fall. I mean, in the spring work time rather. So I'm just finishing that up. That I tell you what, sitting there having avocado toast with John Doe, 14-year-old Tim would be freaking out.
So X is one of your all-time favorites?
He wrote some great songs. Hey, early X, they gave you goosebumps. What can I say?
I love X. Those first four X albums it's like the first four Ramones album. It's like you have to have these records. And that X album that they put out last year is as good.
What is it? Is it a new one?
It's called Alphabet Land. It came out on Fat Possum last year. Some of it is material that you may have heard in X demos, but from the late 70s that they never got around to recording. But they wrote a bunch of new songs.
About time.
And it's great. It's the original lineup with Billy Zoom and DJ Bonebreak, and it's fantastic. It was so good to hear that. John's folk album is going to be really good too.
I always love that song he wrote, See How We Are. It was a great song. It was
Fantastic.
a classic anthem.
Burning House of Love, even though the production on that album was horrible.
So if the Clash is one of your favorite all-time bands, what do you think of late stage Clash?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. Are you talking about
I'm not an expert. Was it Joe Strummer who left the band at the end?
Okay. You're talking about that lineup that
it was like 5 members suddenly. It was
after they fired Mick Jones and
they fired Mick Jones, right?
Those songs are actually really good if you could find the demos to them, but they tried to do a techno production on what was supposed to be a return to punk roots album, and it's not good, but the songs are incredible.
What years what years was that?
That was 85 that came out.
So it was before Mick Jones did Big Audio Dynamite, and
it was all about he did Big Audio Dynamite just after he left the Clash or was fired.
Are there any new youngster punk rock groups that you like?
Yeah, I like Amyl and the Sniffers out of Australia. Great female-led band. You know, Amy, the singer, is just a spitfire, and they've got that rebel spirit. Same thing with a band that I really love a lot out of California called the Interrupters. Again, female singer named Amy. She's got that Joan Jett vibe for sure. Joan's as much of a heroine to me as Johnny Thunders or somebody like that. They're very much ska-based, but I always loved that reggae punk crossover. And yeah, it's that rebel music vibe that attracts me.
So what did you think of the kind of first wave of post-punk? What did you think of Public Image Limited? What did you think about all that stuff?
Loved Public Image Limited. I loved Joy Division, and as I've talked about with Lydia before.
I love both of them too.
My favorite
magazine I loved.
My favorite though was Gang of Four.
Loved Gang of Four.
Gang of Four was my favorite. I mean, I've done this series.
Wire as well.
Wire was fantastic. I've been doing this series of interviews at Alternative Press with punk legends, and I was so thrilled to get to talk to John King and Hugo Burnham about the Gang of Four box set that came out earlier this year. I mean, it's one of those things where like 14-year-old Tim is saying, no fucking way. You're talking to the Gang of Four. No. I mean,
but what about you? So that's that kind of trajectory of post-punk. But what do you think about when going in more extreme and maybe more transgressive things like thrashcore, some of the stuff out of Boston, grindcore in like England? Like, I mean, maybe is that getting too metalish for you? Or
oh yeah. I am. As I said, I do not have a metallic bone in my body.
But the thing is, it's funny that those guys, they weren't really metal. They blast beats. They kind of went more in that direction, but they're not really metalheads. It's
hardcore. I loved the early hardcore bands. You know, I loved Black Flag very obviously, and the Bad Brains and that stuff. But once all those guys figured out how to play their instruments, they became the metal bands that they wanted to be all along. And I don't like it. It became, you know, Charles Bukowski had that phrase, unoriginal macho energy, and that always summed that vibe to me. And once hardcore became just nothing about speed, and then suddenly you're getting to grindcore and thrashcore, it's getting faster and faster and faster. It's like, where's the groove? It becomes this oppressive music. You know, I know that it chased a lot of the women out of the punk scene that used to be involved once it became, you know, a soundtrack for beating up your partner do-si-do. You need to have those influences, that female energy, that energy from gay culture. You need to have those things in there.
I mean, heavy metal's pretty gay. I mean, come on.
You wouldn't believe how many of those guys were shocked to find out that Rob Halford of Judas Priest.
Well, and he was always like, I was more surprised that they didn't know.
I know.
Oh, like, I'm in leather. Like, what is this?
I know. It's like, hello.
Well, on that note, I think we're just going to wrap this up, because once we start getting, I feel like I want to go grindcore myself, and I don't mean the music right now. After all this punk rock energy, I just think it's time to tie it up. So,
you can say tie it up, Timmy's.
Tie it up, Timmy's. So thank you, Tim Stegall, rock journalist, musician, encyclopedia of all things punk, and obviously country as well. And great talking to you, my friend.
This is great talking to you too, Lydia. We need to talk more often.
Not a problem.
And Tim, I sent you a friend request at Facebook.
Okay. I think I might have said yes. I'll look, but 100%. We're friends now. It's official.
Absolutely, we are. I mean, it's you've got the best first name in the world after all. So
I was on my birth certificate, it's Timothy, but
yes,
as far as I remember, everyone calls me Tim. Every now and then, some asshole calls me Timbo or Timmy, but it doesn't really fit my personality. So
No.
I like to sing the song, Timothy. Where on earth did you go? Whoa.
A great pop song about cannibalism.
It's what I'm talking about. You're making me hungry. All right, this is the Lydian spin. We're gonna go munch.
Oh yes.
Great meeting you, Tim. And
yeah, likewise.
I love you, Lydia.
Love you too, baby.